Welcome, everyone. The event is now live. John, please take it away.
Thanks, Allison. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's live tech talk from dev to deploy, unlocking secure software velocity with AI. This event was organized by the hardworking folks at Pure AI, and it's sponsored by Harness, provider of an end-to-end software delivery platform that helps engineering teams achieve the highest levels of engineering excellence. I'm John K. Waters, editor-in-chief of the Converge 360 Group of 1105 Media, and I'm joined today by author and AI innovation leader, Pranav Rastogi. Hi, Pranav.
Hi, John. How are you doing?
I'm good. So I'm going to tell the folks a little bit about you. As Senior Director of Product at Harness, Pranav leads the product team for the company's AI-powered continuous integration and code repository. Before Harness, he worked as a product manager at Microsoft, for products such as the Power Platform and Microsoft AI. So he's just the guy I want to talk to today about the topic of today's discussion. But before we get going, I need to do just a bit of housekeeping. This Tech Talk is being recorded for later access. Keep an eye out for an email with a link to that recording. It'll be coming your way in the next few days. Our sponsor has provided some extra resources you won't want to miss. They're available now on your console. At the end of this conversation, we'll have a 5 to 10 minute Q&A. Please type your questions into the Q&A box. As they occur to you, we'll do our very best to get to all of them. Now, I want to set the stage for our talk today. One more little blurb here. To sort of state the obvious, dev teams are under more pressure than ever these days. They're racing against tight deadlines, rising complexity, and ever-present security threats. But the advent of AI has become a true game changer for anyone building software. From eliminating tedious tasks to catching security issues before they escalate, AI is helping developers ship better software faster and more securely. We're going to be talking about how dev teams are using AI to move beyond code generation to smart testing, streamlined deployment, and continuous security. Okay, Pranav, let's start with that first assertion. We know that developers are using AI for code generation. How are they using it to move beyond code generation?
It's a very interesting question, John. Like if you look at most of the scenarios where AI is being applied today is how do I generate code for lots of different use cases? Like could be I want to fix a bug or a task was assigned to me, or I'm just sort of experimenting, which is, a majority of the use cases around there where you would often hear a term called wipe code where, lots of developers are just pushing out code. But the challenge that remains over here is like, once code has been produced, what do you do after that? Like, how do you then make sure that the code that is produced is meeting your compliance requirements? How do you build and deploy? Often enough, we call it sort of the outer loop of a developer experience where then you have to make sure that the code can go through all the checks that you've defined in your CI/CD pipelines, all the security scanners that you might want to run as an organization, all the test scenarios that you want to run. And then how do you measure quality using AI through all these gates that the generated code has gone through? And then once the code has been deployed, then how do you make sure that the deployments are going on fine, detect anomalies, maybe do rollbacks instead of doing manual rollbacks of the deployed software, and then also being able to sort of having a sense of what does your cost structure look like as your code has been now deployed into production, or your resources consumption going up or down because of this code that was changed. If the code that was changed, for example, using Terraform providers, should the code have been blocked early enough? Should we have left shifted that? So there are a lot of different use cases where we are seeing AI being used quite a lot, beyond just the realm of just code generation is in isolation as a developer sort of interacts with different aspects of the software delivery process.
Got any real-world examples of AI accelerating the software development lifecycle up your sleeve?
Oh, lots and lots of them. Like we've seen customers like United Airlines, probably reduce their build times by 70% by using AI to select a subset of tests based on the code that was changed. So, if I change a README, I don't have to rerun all of the tests, essentially, right? Then customers like, Siemens Healthcare have reduced their test creation time by 90%. So if you're generating lots of end-to-end functional tests for web applications, like often enough, you have to make sure that the tests are resilient. If the button changes or the green, if the color changes, then customers like Tish and others have where DevOps engineers have upskilled themselves, and now they're able to generate features using sort of these AI tools that are available to them. And we've even had customers say, like, where developer productivity has improved by about 30 to 40% using AI. And then lastly, when it comes to deployment, we've had customers like Citi who've sort of slashed their release time from days to minutes by using automated rollback, where using a continuous verification feature, where you listen to signals from your deployed applications, from your application management, like APM endpoints, and then do automated rollbacks based on any anomalies that you've had. Like, so there are lots of real world use cases that we are seeing out there, like beyond just specific to generating code, where lots of customers and users have been successful in using AI in these scenarios.
Okay, so how does AI improve the developer experience without adding new tooling? Tooling fatigue is, I don't know. I think it's rampant.
It is, and over the last couple of years, if you look back on how sort of it started, like there was an influx of a lot of tools that got introduced in the developer workflows, and what we've observed is a lot of developers are experimenting with a lot of these tools. So there is a lot of distraction that we're seeing, especially from an enterprise adoption perspective. And I think our point of view that we've sort of landed upon is like, where at our core, like Harness started off with our mission to reduce sort of developer toil, where we want to focus on end user problems versus just like having cool technology as such. So wherever we've found success where AI has been able to augment what a developer has already been using, like it's not about sort of replacing developers, but helping them sort of be more successful in the tasks that they have. So instead of being like, hey, why don't you try these 30 other tools to complete your software review process? Like we are trying to sort of, or the success that we've seen generally in the industry is where vendors have been able to augment these developer workflows with the tool sets that they already have, versus having them switch to a completely new tool chain. Like, developers, we have this mental model, right? We are used to certain shortcuts when it comes to IDs and stuff, and there's a cost of context switching across all of these tools. So the more we can minimize and more we can augment the existing developer workflows, the more successes we've seen with the customers that we've sort of interacted with.
Very cool. So in what ways would you say AI can reduce bottlenecks in CI/CD pipelines?
Oh, wow. That's like, we need another webinar for that topic itself. No, so I think we touched a little bit about it, but it starts with the code generation, where we'll see a lot of focus in the industry today, but where we've not seen a lot of focus is just beyond what happens from after the code has been generated. So take a classic example of build and test. So this is where we can help reduce build times by only selecting a subset of tests that were impacted based on the code that was changed. And this is a big bottleneck, right? From a testing perspective, we've all seen that comic where developers trigger off a build and then go get a coffee, and then they'll probably be having the coffee for a few hours. And so how can we reduce this bottleneck using AI by only selecting a subset of tests? And tests could be of different types as well. You could have written unit tests, which could be running as part of your PR workflows, or your security scanners, or you might have functional end-to-end tests being run, or you might be introducing chaos experiments into the mix as well. So, and all of these tests, could be different for different app types. For web apps, there'll be a different set of suites that you want to run, and then for mobile apps, you probably want to do device testing, which is sort of unique to all these domains, or like Salesforce deployments. Or so each of these deployments is what we've found, test to be a big bottleneck. And that's where we found like AI to be a lot more successful, both in the test generation side of it, as well as in the test selection and execution side of the house as well. Caching, another good example in the build process, is like, why rebuild everything when you can just intelligently cache what was already built and reuse across different sort of pipelines. And then once a pipeline fails, like debugging a pipeline is extremely hard, because from a DevOps engineer persona, like they necessarily don't know what the code is being built. And so like common examples where you have missing dependencies or the code doesn't compile can now easily be fixed by applying AI to the build failures itself. And then when it comes to deployment, like this is one of the most like complex sections of a software delivery lifecycle, because it is now sort of touching real production systems and interacting with real production monitoring data that's coming in. And so as a human today, like, the DevOps or the SRE engineers have to make sense of all of these different signals coming from different tool sets, different applications, different service types, and different application types as well, whether it's like a web or a mobile or a backend API. And then they have to correlate everything and then make sense whether the system is stable or not, or are there any anomalies in the production system. And then often enough, these are detected late in the life cycle. And then once detected late, then it just becomes a fire drill where prod one instance get fired, and it's very hard to roll back. So all of this, just takes tremendous amount of labor. You're not able to get it right. But then being able to apply AI over here sort of reduces this bottleneck. And that's where we've seen customers reduce their release times from like days to minutes instantly. And that sort of has helped them, ship software faster. So these are some areas where we've seen sort of AI can help reduce, bottlenecks in your overall SDLC lifecycle.
Okay. How about continuous verification? How does AI enhance continuous verification, and what tools make it possible?
Oh, that's perfect. So this again could just be another webinar, but like if you think about continuous verification, like at the crux of it, the problem that's trying to solve from an end user perspective is, given an application that's been deployed with all of the dependencies, how can you detect whether the application is running smoothly in production, and then being able to do something about it if there are any anomalies. And do something could be, you maybe want to have a different rollback strategy, or maybe you would just want to have a different rollout strategy, whether it's a blue-green, or a canary-based deployment, or you're flighting out your web application or your mobile application to a subset of users. So here is where AI can help enhance the whole experience of deployment, where it can intelligently listen to all of the signals coming from your APM tools and then detect anomalies based on these signals, and then do automated rollback of these for these applications to the previous version of the applications based on the signals, essentially. And that sort of helps reduce downtime. It helps reduce sort of any manual intervention that's required by SREs or DevOps engineers itself. And then, what we've seen from customers like Burst SMS is where now they're able to sort of drive a 96% improvement in their build time, where they've cut it down like from hours to under 5 minutes, because they were now able to use this AI-based continuous verification, where everything is sort of essentially is automated, and there are compliance checks in place where you can from an audit perspective see what happened. So this is where we've seen sort of AI help a lot with reducing bottlenecks in deployments and being able to automatically roll back a version that's out there.
So how reliable is AI in generating meaningful unit and end-to-end tests?
AI is sort of getting better, I would say, at generating both of these test types. So we've been using AI to generate unit tests for like the last, I think, 7 years, and we've seen tremendous success, upwards of 95+%. And as the models in general have been getting better for functional tests, more specifically, especially with respect to web applications and stuff, like that that accuracy has increased a lot. And then what we have seen over here is essentially where we've been using AI to generate these end-to-end unit tests, end-to-end functional tests, where the user can express the intent based on just a natural language prompt. So if you're having an e-commerce website, maybe you just want to test out the checkout functionality. So instead of having to code out your entire test using JavaScript or any of the test runners, you can just express your intent that you want to have a checkout testing scenario. And then this AI test automation will just generate the test on your behalf, and it'll self-heal as well. And that's where the AI has sort of gotten better. It's just not about the generation of the test, but more about the long-term maintainability of the test itself, where the test would self-heal if it detects that the checkout button, for example, has moved to a different location on the site. So those are the nuances that we've now started to see getting better with AI test generation, more specifically. And then we've seen lots of customers, being super successful with this test automation as well, where they're able to reduce their test generation and test maintenance time substantially.
Okay. Can AI effectively understand edge cases in automated testing, or is human intervention still critical?
So, it's an interesting one. It started maybe a few years, or actually a long time back, with Netflix sort of launching Chaos Monkey as a theme, where let sort of this experiment test out the boundaries of the system, the application and stuff. But what AI has been able to help is sort of essentially drive context into the scenario, where instead of just blindly sort of introducing faults based on, network limitations or CPU memory limitations, which are sort of fairly generic, I would say, faults in the system, but now it can be more contextual to whether it's a mobile app or a web app, what kind of dependencies does this application or service have? And then as these, so-called bots in our world learn about these application patterns, they can introduce these faults by themselves without a human being involved in the loop. And where the human sort of essentially needs to have some sort of a supervision is once these set of chaos experiments, or these set of, I would say, in edge cases experiments, and these edge cases could be, I want to do traditional testing of unit functional, or I want to do chaos style fault injection, or I want to do SLA SLO based injections, or I want to do some business metrics where would this change drive an increase in the adoption of this app, or would this change drive the download count of this app in the Apple App Store? And then towards the end, you get a report as a human that you can then review on what does the health of the system look like. So more and more is where we are seeing a notion of these autonomous agents sort of talking to each other and leveraging the data that exists within the Harness platform, because this is where essentially your entire SDLC is coming in, where you have knowledge of what the code is being built, what the dependencies and different application patterns can be captured if you're building a monolith or a microservice, and what are you calling out to? And all can also be sort of laid upon this concept of being able to monitor at the edge. And your edge could be your browser or maybe your physical devices where the application is being deployed. So this constant richness of data that can happen, and then bots can sort of take advantage of it, would help essentially AI identify these edge cases and then just report out back to the humans for the last check before the application gets further deployed in your SDLC lifecycle.
So it still needs us so far. What role would you say AI plays in test coverage optimization?
Quite a lot, actually. Now it has gone from just code generation, which was the core use case, but more about the code that is now being generated. Can we also generate the missing test for code coverage and test coverage, and then make sure that your test or the code that is being generated is meeting all of the quality requirements? And it is just not about test coverage optimization. It could be generalized for a quality optimization as well, where it could cover your security checks, your compliance checks. And then when the tests are generated and they're being run through a CI/CD pipeline, it's where when AI can also further optimize which tests to run based on the code that was changed as well. Because what's happening in the industry in general is lots of code and lots of tests is being generated, and that's sort of increasing the build and test CI/CD pipeline times as well, because now you have more code to be built and more tests to be run as well. So that's where we see AI playing a role, where it can optimize the code, ensure that you have the right quality coverage, and then when the CI/CD pipelines are being executed, ensure that the relevant set of tests are only run, so build times are shorter.
Okay, I'm wondering, do you see AI evolving the concept of shift left, he tried to say, testing?
Shift left? Oh yeah. In fact, this was a trend that we came up with quite about 7 years back, where the goal is how can you shift left everything as close to developers as possible. And the term by itself has existed for a long time, but how do you make a reality out of it? And 7 years back, we started with sort of our AI-based test intelligence feature, where you could select a subset of tests based on the code that was changed, and left shift, essentially, where instead of taking 2 hours and the tests were run every day, now you can run tests on every PR to a developer. And you can shift a lot of stuff closer to developers. You can shift security scanners, you can shift functional testing, you can also shift chaos testing, you can also left shift edge, these edge cases testing. You can also left shift PR and dev environments or QA environments. So the goal would be essentially, as a developer, you just make a PR, and then everything, all the feedback that you had to receive, you've sort of received at that point in time. And there's no back and forth where, now the app is deployed and it's broken, there's a missing dependency. And then because with each of these bugs that are found later downstream, there's a cost of context switching, as a developer. And that essentially increases the developer toil and then reduces the efficiency as an organization.
So how can AI triage and remediate security vulnerabilities before code even hits production?
That's a good one. Because through a combination of scanners, essentially, right? Where the code that is being generated, is it meeting all your security and compliance requirements? And then you can also have, before a pipeline gets deployed into production, you can also define some sort of approval or a gated policy where if your code meets these certain thresholds, like the quality coverage is greater than X percentage, no security vulnerabilities found, then you can sort of deploy your code into production. And if there are any sort of vulnerabilities found in the system, that is when you can also, AI can help remediate all of these vulnerabilities as well, where it can look up, CVEs, which are the most commonly sourced data for all of these vulnerabilities, and then raise a PR for you that you can review as a developer. So that sort of helps improve developer productivity again, where you don't have to go figure out what is the fix for the CVE as a developer.
Okay, talk about the risks of using generative AI for secure software development and how we mitigate those risks.
I think the biggest risk that we are seeing just generally in the industry is, can you trust the code sort of that was generated through these set of tools? And this code could have been generated at different points in the SDLC lifecycle, all the way from code to build and test to deployment as well. And so that's top of mind from a lot of the customers, at least that we've talked to, is and a good way or a good set of strategies an organization can follow to mitigate is before any code gets deployed into production, make sure that you have your security and compliance checks in place to protect this code from essentially being generated. And then have enough visibility on how the code was generated, track the code that was generated for any open source references or attribution around how this code was being generated itself. So these compliance rules, I think, is how we've seen customers essentially mitigate this risk. Where how do you trust the code that was generated?
Okay, so how are teams using AI to enforce governance and compliance policies like Open Policy Agent?
So, Open Policy Agent for folks is an open source tool, right, where you can write policies. And what we've seen, the use of AI in that space has been largely focused on two areas. Like one, how do we use AI to generate these policies? Because often enough, like OPA uses Rego, which could be a language like hard to understand for a lot of developers and DevOps engineers. So how can we make it easier as an organization to sort of generate these policies? And then secondly, how do you enforce these policies, which is through a combination of standard templates or a golden set of templates, where this is how an organization will roll out their applications in a controlled way, and then making sure that access rules are defined around these OPA policies and pipelines, and so who can create these policies and who can audit these policies, and then giving the feedback back to the developers early enough. So maybe warning them if they don't have these approval policies in place, or if they remove these steps in the pipeline. We've often seen enough where the DevOps team would put these checks in, but the developers would go delete this code. So having like a tool which can help you protect from all of these scenarios and have a sort of fairly strong RBAC system in place that can let you sort of scale is a good way to enforce governance and the use of OPA policies as well.
Makes sense. So is AI capable of detecting and responding to supply chain threats in real time?
Yes. The reason why we can do it with AI is and the most important thing over here is like being able to sort of track the movement of code all the way from its generation, let's say in your IDEs or anywhere else, and then there's a pipeline that produces an artifact. An artifact has a software bill of materials on what all was used to create this artifact, and then this artifact got deployed. And so if you're able to sort of track this end to end, as well as monitor these applications at the edge, so you have some sort of a runtime security model in place. Like the combination of pipelines and essentially runtime security will help AI detect these supply chain attacks in real time, and then protect as well as mitigate. So once you have detected, then quickly generate the right action, and the right action could be anything like here's a code fix on how to protect against this threat, essentially. So, but you need both. So you need a combination of what we say like pipeline data plus runtime or edge security data sort of coming together for this to be real.
Fascinating. So, what does it take to integrate AI responsibly with enterprise guardrails?
A few things. Like you, as an organization, you need to have a template or a policy in place where you can, define that here is the defined way of rolling an application out into production. And this will have lots of different checks and balances in place. This is the tools to build. This is how testing will happen. This is the security scanners to run. And this is how deployment is going to roll out. And then you have to put the right guardrails at different steps. So you have to make sure that the test, quality rate should be greater than 80%, and then start to introduce, if you're building if you're customizing models, start to introduce some sort of AI-based check. So what's your responsibility score? Does your model have any bias in it? And have guardrails in place to protect the deployment of these assets if any of these violations happen and stuff. So you have to sort of start customizing now your pipelines to make sure that So it's what we say, like, combination of DevOps coming together with MLOps slash AI slash Gen AI slash LLM ops together. So that's the combination of those two worlds coming together, and different concerns and different quality gates would have to come together as well. Like, because right now there are two sort of separate systems where two different teams maintain these and two different governance standards exist. But there's not a single standard or a single platform that can help customers go through it. So get rid of this fragmentation, try to bring all of these together and have a single governance policy, which includes like responsible AI, fairness score, and other aspects of AI too.
Okay, so how can teams ensure AI recommendations align with internal code standards and policies?
That's an interesting one. It's a two-pronged approach, like, because as a developer, you just want freedom, right? I just want to write code and be done with it. Like, I do not care so much about policies and standards, but as an organization leader, like as an engineering leader, like you do care a lot about like coding standards and policy. So it's sort of a tug and war, like that we like to call it, but it's sort of a good two-pronged approach where like let's start from what is the business goal of the whole company, like what do you want to do, like you want to ship for velocity, what does your like metrics look like, and then have a notion of some sort of like an internal development portal where you can capture some of your coding standards, your policies in place, and then have a prescriptive way of getting started, like through cloud-based environments, which come prepackaged with a set of tools and libraries and binaries that developers would need. So developers can then get started and then have templated pipelines for CI/CD where at least some of the boilerplate like quality gate controls are already there. And then there is enough extensibility in the system where developers can modify what they want. So often enough, what we've seen is developers want to test out with the latest version of like Apple software. Like we have, Worldwide Developer Conference coming up next week, and Apple has launched a lot of RC, tools and versions that are available, which the central DevOps team might not be possible for them to release at a faster cadence, but developers do want it. So striking this balance on, you have your standard policies, you have your standard templates, but also giving flexibility to developers to also bring in these new tools at a faster cadence is the sort of, I would say, the tug of war that we sort of need to make it happen in organizations to make sure that they can have internal coding standards and policies.
So I'm going to hit you with a metrics question. What success metrics should engineering leaders track when implementing AI into their DevOps tool chains?
I think this is a space that we still see it's evolving, and we have a traditional metrics of DORA. We have our deployment metrics. We also have space, and then there are a lot of different experiments that are also happening. It's to track what is the efficiency of an AI model, because there's a lot of developers, I would say, trying out a lot of different AI tools or vibe coding as well, which could lead to sort of lost productivity. And so the third one is around how do you measure engineering organization efficiency, where as an organization, are you being more efficient using these set of AI models? Could be from any vendor. And so I'd say, like, have the third one is where you'll see a lot of benefit on whether the use of AI is helping you as an organization to produce more code, which meets your quality requirements. There's less regressions, less quality regressions. And then as an organization, you're being sort of more, are you being more efficient or not using AI would be the third vector to use.
So what are the biggest blockers to adoption of AI in software delivery today? What are you seeing in this space?
So we've seen sort of 4 key challenges with, from an adoption of AI perspective. The first one being is just lack of context awareness. So there's just too many tools not talking to each other, too many silo tools, too many tools focused just on code gen, one part of the software delivery lifecycle, but they don't not focused on the outer loop at all. So there's a lot of noise essentially that happens because of this. And then it goes back, I think, to what we are talking about, right? To like fatigue was essentially what happens to developers. The second one is around security and data privacy. Essentially, is what's stopping AI adoption. Is and essentially top of mind for a lot of customers is like, how do you make sure that the vendor is not sort of leveraging the customer's data or customer's IP to train, and suddenly they've sort of leaked all their IP. So how do we make sure that we are using AI with a privacy first approach where no customer data is used for training? And then the third one is around just fragmented developer flows as well, where since these tools don't have the context, now developers have lots of different tools for siloed operations. So they're living in IDs, and now they're trying out like CI/CD pipelines. There are a lot of different automation tools and frameworks available. So they're going to different portals. They're going to different monitoring tools to debug their pipelines, which essentially leads to sort of lost productivity. Which is the last one is around, once an organization has spent time with AI, or developers are spending a lot of time vibe coding, how do you measure the ROI as an organization? Because did you achieve the outcomes that you wanted with AI? Was the outcome experimentation, or was the outcome real business impact, which is not very clear as well, right? So these are the four key sort of challenges that we have seen, which is I would say like the biggest blockers for AI adoption today.
Okay, how can engineering teams strike this a balance, I guess I would say, between automation and oversight?
Oh, that's a hard one.
I know.
I think it all just sort of comes down to, as engineering teams, is focus on what the company goal is, because there's a lot of noise out there in the market. Things have changed. It's exciting times, no doubt. But the teams that we've seen to be successful are the ones that focus on what does the company want, what's the company goals, how will AI best fit where the company goals are, and then sort of using AI helping meet those company goals or accelerating those company goals. And then you can decide which parts do you want to automate and which parts do you want to just have an oversight on. For example, you can decide, let AI generate all the tests, and as long as the code coverage and test coverage is greater than 90%, it's fine. So that's where you can strike this balance of letting AI automate and having oversight to make sure that your quality rules are in place. So, and each one of these decision points will be different for each customer, depending on what the goals are for the organization and stuff. So that's the key to balance, between automation and oversight.
Makes sense. Okay, so I always like to wrap up these conversations with a question, with a sort of a future-focused question. And the one I wrote out for you is, where do you see the biggest opportunities for AI to drive cultural transformation in software teams? Roles are changing.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Yeah, but roles are changing. How do you see this?
Yeah, roles are changing. I'd say pretty much every day, and that's exciting. It could be, in one hand, it's exciting for folks, and on one hand, could be scary as well, because there's so much of change happening, right? But I think what we've seen, though, if you look at sort of the next 5 years, we see a world where there'll be a lot of, essentially, for a lack of loose word, I'll say, just agents working on our behalf, and these agents are context aware, so they sort of understand a business context, they understand the code context, they understand the pipeline construct context on what is happening in SDLC, they understand how does incident management happen, they'll understand how does security happen at the edge, and then they'll be able to leverage all of the data that exists in the system and take away all of the sort of, I would say, manual activities or manual activities or boring activities that a developer has to go do, and then come back with results and back to the developer for oversight And so that's the shift that'll happen culturally as an organization, is like, how can you leverage the data that you have better to make decisions faster and sort of more long-term, like high quality data. And then it's less about like code gen in isolation. It's less about somebody just upskilling themselves and being able to generate code, but it's more about being the code that was generated. Can you run it reliably, securely from a long-term perspective? Like that means like no passwords were leaked. Like, I saw with Lovable, like there were like 2 or 3 different use cases in the last week where the same app was generated with leaked passwords essentially. So that is where, we believe like the agents that will succeed, or the organization that will succeed, is as they're able to transform themselves from a long-term like security, compliance, reliability perspective, and they're able to sort of leverage AI to help them meet those goals faster.
I love that. It's the collision of excitement and fear.
Yes.
Well, my friend, I've asked all of my questions. Shall we get to the audience questions?
Yeah,
okay, folks, remember, you can type your questions into the Q&A box at any time, and we'll do our best to get to all of them. Let's start with this one from Al, who's wondering, how does Harness handle data and privacy regarding AI?
Hello. So Harness, when it comes to data, so we don't train any of the models on customer data. Like all of these models have been trained internally on Harness. All we do essentially for all of our use case, and each use case is different. So most of our use cases, for example, if you take debugging pipelines, like in this case, is just the logs of the pipeline execution, which don't have any proprietary information, are used to sort of recommend best practices itself. And so this is one of the ways where we don't train anything on customer data, which helps then customers sort of trust more, where their IP is not being leaked essentially as part of this process. This was the first question I expected, John. On this. This was the first question I expected.
Okay, so what are the biggest problems you have seen when it comes to AI-generated code?
It's a combination of quality, and I would say it's a combination of long-term quality. So let me explain that. Like, so you have code that's generated. There's a short-term quality that could be improved by generating unit tests along with it, but then there's a long-term quality of it, where if the code that is deployed, let's say 6 months down the line, like, does it cause more regressions? Does it cause more quality, like performance issues? Does it cause more incidents? So that's where, like, if the code that is generated can be guaranteed, like, for long-term better quality, then it's a good quality code essentially. But if the code that's generated is code that was generated without understanding what the impact would be, then this is a fairly low quality code that was generated.
Okay. Got one here from Perry, who's wondering, as someone who works at a company that is mostly on-prem, I wonder what have you seen, or this is for you as a worker mostly on-prem, what have you seen work when it comes to the use of AI?
So when it comes to on-prem, like what we've seen is lots of these customers would then just sort of self-host a platform within their own network, which gives them the compliance or boundaries that they're sort of essentially looking out for. Would be the best way to go about it.
Okay, I've got a excitement meets fear question here from Supreet, who's wondering, will AI replace, if not 100%, the work of DevOps engineers?
Oh, wow. Will AI replace the, if not 100%, the work of DevOps engineers? I would say, like, AI will more transform like DevOps and engineering teams essentially. And the way I would answer that is like today, like you have engineering team, you have DevOps engineers, and in your day-to-day workflow, sort of you might be searching like to learn or debug or figure out why things are not working or not. Like, but there would be a world where you will be interacting with lots of agents who are doing work on your behalf essentially, and then you might just be supervising and understanding what they're coming back with. So instead of going and figuring out all the edge cases yourself, like you could also then start to leverage these agents who understand the data and the context that's coming along, and that also sort of become like some sort of a peer programmer, in the software world where you can bounce ideas and then you can experiment a lot more faster in this world.
Okay, my friend, that's all the questions we have from our attendees, and that's all the time we have for this Tech Talk. I want to thank Pranav Rastogi for an informative conversation, and many, many thanks to the folks at Harness for making this conversation possible. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.